when you're being chased by a supernatural killer, it's hard to really metal out the best...
I'm sorry. If these two bastards came after me, this one gave me chills. I have to watch this movie. I have to.
12 hours at home to relax and sleep before doing it all over again. Theoretically, you could carry out this commuting back and forth plan essentially forever.
Imagine just one day you oversleep for like 2 hours. It's R.I.P. buddy boy. Boo! Aha! I saw you move. No, you didn't. You weren't scared. You think you were scared of my face. I love making jokes about myself. It just wonders on my self-confidence. Film Theory, another one on matpat's channel. You know, this one's also very amazing. Watching Film Theory is the only way to beat the monster from It Follows. Alright, I haven't seen It Follows. I'm sorry. I think I'm just being kind of lacking on everything. But like, this is a horror movie. I know. I've seen I know it chases you. Okay, that's what I know. Okay, I saw. I didn't watch it though because I didn't know if it was good. But I regret my decisions and I'm sorry. But let's watch this video, okay? Because calm down, please.
Teen pregnancy and STD rates have both been falling since the mid-1960s. Sure, this could be due to things like women's empowerment, better health education for kids in schools, access to better medicine, and more supportive families with fewer reckless teenagers, or it could be what I like to think it is, a string of terrifying horror movies about babies and how teens doing it is a literal death sentence. Put those anatomic bananas away for this health class, Mr. Tompkins. Instead, just scare the pants off of all those 15-year-olds, or should I say scare the pants onto all those 15-year-olds with an in-class movie.
Right, with these kids. Film Theory.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, where after watching today's episode, you'll be followed around by an invisible entity who will hunt you down until you share this video with someone else. Just kidding.
He's not kidding.
Or am I? On that ominous note, today's episode is about the modern horror classic 2014's It Follows, which should be on your Halloween season watch list if you've never seen it. In a fun and terrifying intersection between high school health class and horror movie, It Follows is about the Entity, a supernatural creature who endlessly stalks you and kills you after you have yourself a one-night stand. No, really, imagine getting a text the next morning that's like, oops, left my sunglasses at your apartment last night. Oh yeah, and a supernatural being that could look like anyone will kill you in 5 days or less. So, you know what, just keep the sunglasses. The Entity can shapeshift. It never rests, it never stops, and it hunts you down relentlessly until you either die or you pass the curse along to someone else by sleeping with them. So then, why would you not just silently pass it on to the next unsuspecting victim? Well, first, the person that you do it with now has themselves a death sentence. Even here in LA, where the dating scene is known to be pretty killer, I think that's generally frowned upon. Second, and more selfishly important, once the Entity has killed your one-night stand, it'll keep moving back down the chain to the person who gave it to them, and the person who gave it to them, and them, and them, and them, presumably to everyone who's ever been cursed. So in order to protect yourself, you have to tell your lover that they're now a victim and hope that they do a good job of outrunning this thing or sleeping with someone else in order to buy you enough buffer time to live your life in peace. Talk about those regretful teenage choices following you for the rest of your oh my gosh, it's the title of the movie. In the movie, protagonist Jay tries to dodge and outmaneuver the Entity, who slowly wears her down with mental tricks, tenacity, and constant movement. Admittedly, when you're being chased by a supernatural killer, it's hard to really metal out the best...
I'm sorry. If these two bastards came after me, this one gave me chills. I have to watch this movie. I have to.
For staying alive, as literally every horror movie victim in history has shown, which is where I'm stepping in. Today's episode is all about helping us figure out if it is in fact possible to outrun the Entity in the long term without just passing the curse on to someone else, and if so, how do you do it? How do you outrun the physical manifestation of your relationship mistakes? Well, watch on, everyone. Your next Tinder date could depend on it. To defeat the Entity, you have to stay ahead of it, and to stay ahead of it, you need to know where it is and how fast it's going. It doesn't take any big brain activity to figure that one out. While smart and relentless, we know that the Entity has at least one sort of weakness. It's slow. Or, at the very least, slow enough that you can get ahead of it in something like a car. The tempting thing to do would be to throw some paint on it, Invisible Man style, lock it in a box, and hire old Elon Musk over there to strap it to his next SpaceX rocket. In fact, the internet is just crawling with these kinds of theories and solutions for how to constantly jet set, sleep with an astronaut, all kinds of crazy things. Unfortunately, very few few of those solutions are even remotely realistic. A lot of them involve a lot of planning, not to mention a lot of money. So we need something that's a little bit more down to earth that your average 19-year-old horror movie protagonist could feasibly pull off. The lack of having endless money for infinite travel even rules out a few of the simple solutions, like having a house in California and another one in Maine, and just bouncing back and forth between the two coasts. Even a really well-paying job with a flexible work life would barely make something like that feasible. And while we're talking about impractical solutions, I'm also going to rule out the idea of passing it along to an animal, Black Mirror style, which some have suggested as an option. Because honestly, it's just not smart. Animals aren't doing it with enough other creatures. They're going to be very easy for the entity to find and kill, but now there's really zero chance of you knowing when the line has come back to you.
Exactly.
Now, as with so many things in life and on this channel, the most viable solution as I see it to defeating this supernatural entity is to use the ultimate weapon, math. Sends a chill down your spine. Can we use math to figure out where the entity is at any given point in time and then calmly, rationally stay out of its way? It's not as sexy as a titanium castle or a ride on a SpaceX rocket, but it just might work. Let's start with what we know about the entity. 1. The creature is always moving towards its prey, and it always walks. When it's on the beach, it's walking. When it's at the college, it's walking. During the climax of the film, it walks. 2. It can take on the appearance of any person to fool its prey or mess with their heads. And I mention this not only because it makes the entity an unrelenting killer, it also makes it a jerk. 3. The entity cannot walk through walls or fences. When it breaks into Jay's house, it breaks a window. When it attacks her in the boathouse, it smashes the door. When it kills Greg, it smashes a window. The entity isn't Nightcrawler here, people. 4. We never see it walking in crowds or traffic, likely because people would bump into it. We know it has a physical form because Paul smacks it with a chair, and it gets a blanket thrown over its head during the swimming pool scene. 5. It swims, as we see when Jay is in the pool during the climax. 6. It can be slowed down, and it bleeds. When Paul shoots it in the head, we see a blood spurt. And finally, number 7, it doesn't use vehicles to move any faster. No hitching a ride on a bus or a moped, not even a Segway. Thanks to some intrepid researchers, we also know how fast the entity is going. I found an ultra-researched article from Mark Hoffmeyer, who wrote an article entitled, "How Far Does the Creature from It Follows Travel?" In that article, Hoffmeyer researched all the Detroit and Michigan era filming locations to come up with an in-depth map of everywhere the entity followed. It Follows is very much a Detroit and surrounding suburbs movie, as several famous locations were used and referenced. This isn't a case of Toronto or Atlanta standing in as Detroit. It's a movie set in Detroit and filmed in Detroit. And wouldn't you know it, but there's a handy citywide tour of all locations in the movie provided to us by MichiganBusiness.org. Michigan, the land of relentless killers, which allows us to actually calculate how fast the entity travels. We start when Jay first becomes infected around 9 p.m. and sees the entity for the first time around midnight at the abandoned Northville Psychiatric Hospital that's located in a suburb of Detroit. The Northville Psychiatric Hospital is 31.4 walking miles away from Jay's house. But before the entity can actually reach her there, she heads for school at the University of Detroit. After a short checkup at the nearest hospital to her house, Henry Ford Macomb. During one of her afternoon classes at the university, she sees the entity for the second time. And this gives us our first major clue. The entity, in its pursuit of Jay, was going directly towards her house for about 21 miles before diverting down to finally come face to face with her at the University of Detroit by early afternoon. In total, the entity walked at least 34 miles in about 12 hours. Jay, shaken by the encounter, then drives to the real-world Clark's Ice Cream and back to her house, where she's attacked later on in the night by the entity, who again has just walked an estimated 20 miles in somewhere around 6 to 8 hours. From there, Jay and her crew travel an estimated 352 miles to the northernmost point of Michigan, where they stay in a cabin for several days before she's ambushed yet again as the entity continues its never-ending leg day. Jay then has a car accident and is in a hospital for a day and passes the curse on to her neighbor Greg, who is now in the hot seat. 3 days pass as the entity slowly marches back down the state to reach Jay's hometown of Sterling Heights. When it does finally get back, Jay and the crew attempt to electrocute it or shoot it in the swimming pool, and it's maybe successful, maybe not. And if the entity wasn't killed in the pool, I mean, it did survive a bullet in the neck earlier on in the movie, then the two will certainly have to live the rest of their lives constantly worrying about it. Now, based on the relative distance between locations, the movie timeline of 15 days, and when we see visual confirmation of the entity, we can calculate that it moves at about a mile every 20 minutes, roughly 3 miles per hour, or 4.8 kilometers an hour, which means that it's traveling 72 miles every day, 116 kilometers, 504 miles every week, 811 kilometers, and 26,280 miles each and every year, 42,293 kilometers. Just to put that in perspective, the greatest distance between any two mainland points in the US is 2,892 miles, from Point Arena, California to West Quoddy Head, Maine. What we're saying here is that in the course of a single year, the entity would be able to travel across the country 10 times. Yeah, you're dealing with a walker who's more motivated than those 70-year-olds you see in the mall before the hour of 10 p.m. So with a pretty good foundation of data here, we now need to come up with a strategy for Jay to survive indefinitely. First, I'd respect the 72-mile-a-day estimate, but I'd also be sure to test it out. On a day that I'm feeling particularly brave, I'd wait for the entity to get somewhat close to me, then I'd drive 5 miles away in as straight a line as possible, and then I'd see how long it'd take to get to me again. Clocking it a few times like this would give me a really accurate average speed for this creature. After that, I'd want to develop a predictable, repeatable travel pattern so I can reliably know where it is all the time. It's like the highest stakes game of pickle in the middle ever. Realistically, because again, the point of this plan is that
Imagine just planning it like, I'm gonna go over here, and the guy in the background who's gonna kill you is like, yeah, that's a good plan. You just turn around. Yeah, I know, right? Huh? How does that guy get back there? Just imagine, that's so creepy, especially because it's walking. I don't know, walking horror dudes is just scarier. I don't know why. I don't know.
Real people would be able to do this, the travel pattern needs to accommodate working for a living, eating, and sleeping. Now, Paul, Jay's boyfriend who's also cursed, works at Clark's Ice Cream, and will most likely need his job to pay his bills. The problem is, Clark's is only 13 miles away from Jay's home, which is a 4-hour and 20-minute walk for the entity. This wouldn't give him enough time to sleep or work a full shift, which means that he's gonna need a longer commute. How long are we talking? 36 miles actually, 58 kilometers. The creature can only walk 36 miles or 58 kilometers in a 12-hour span, meaning that even if Paul worked overtime, he could get out of his job in plenty of time before the entity caught up to him on any given workday. That said, he does want the entity to get pretty close to him by the end of the workday, otherwise he's just passing it midway to Clark's on the drive home. This would put the entity closer than a 12-hour walk from his house once he reroutes, meaning that he would have less than 12 hours at home to relax and sleep before doing it all over again. Theoretically, you could carry out this commuting back and forth plan essentially forever.
Imagine just one day you oversleep for like 2 hours. It's RIP, buddy boy.
With just a few caveats. You need to make sure that you always have an alternate route available to you if your main road's closed, making sure that you know the mileage of that alternate route. Every time you reach a destination, you need to reset the entity before starting back in the other direction. So making sure you know those travel times is absolutely critical. Next, there are no days off for this plan. If Jay or Paul isn't driving to their job exactly 36 miles away, well, they need to drive that distance somewhere else. And always make sure that they have some kind of backup car or transportation in the case of a breakdown. It's not going to be an exciting life, but it is going to be an alive life. And one where, if you've done your math right, you can spend your days not looking over your shoulder and your nights sleeping soundly. And in 2020, hey, that's doing a lot better than most of us, quite honestly. Once you've mastered the livable routine doing this, you could actually build in something like a Disney vacation. You know how long it would take for the entity to walk from Detroit to Orlando, 15.5 days, which gotta say is a cushy 2-week hangout with Mickey, and can now time the entity's arrival to make sure that you're back on a plane just as the entity is strolling past Universal Studios. Any trip where you cross the ocean is going to be a lot trickier, since even if you clock the entity's swimming times like an extremely persistent Michael Phelps, you're never going to be able to take into account things like tides and the Gulf Stream or storms at sea, all things that are going to slow down or speed up boats and the entity as a swimmer. Honestly, your safest bet is to just stay on the same couple of continents. But once you have a grasp on its movements, it's all just a matter of managing the entity, rather than trying to run out your clock or pass it forward only to have it eventually revert back to you. The entity in this solution is no longer horrifying, now it's just horrifyingly routine. In a super ironic twist, in fact, our conclusion actually makes the entity a lot more like an STD than it was even at the beginning of this video. There are a lot of STDs out there that started out like a horror show, even a death sentence, and maybe now the entity can join the list of annoying but manageable sexual oopsies.
Living with sexually transmitted demonic curse
can be a hassle.
Yes.
But then I talked to my doctor about Valtrex.
Just one
36-mile commute
a day helped reduce the number of my outbreaks.
You too can manage your STDC, your sexually transmitted demon curse, not through elaborate Home Alone-style traps, not with dramatic fight scenes or garlic necklaces, but with math and a quality Honda Civic. Seriously, you're gonna want that one to be as reliable as heck. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And congratulations! Today you gained a skill, thanks to a...
Guys, that's the end of the video. Alright, see, simple decisions, okay? If a dude is walking 2-3 miles an hour to kill your ass, you just run away. It's really not that hard, okay? Think about it, like, how fast is it? Like, 2 miles, is like, let's just say 1,600, 1,628, 1,800, 4,800 divided by 60, 1,800, I can't even say that. I can't do the maths in my head. But, it's very slow, and that means you can probably outrun it. So you go from you just get 2 different houses, you know, like keep switching like houses, and you know, it's a done deal. This monster, it's not even that. Why were they trying to kill it? Like you don't even know if you can kill it. It's literally a demon that takes in other forms. Do you think you can kill it with a gun? I don't think so. But if you guys enjoyed the video, you know, it's time for yourself. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.